let's move on to our final film of the evening, Scott, which is Predestination.
Yes, and as we discussed about before recording, it's a tough one to talk about considerately. It's best enjoyed by knowing as little as possible going into it. Even something as simple as some curiously oblique character names will prompt a few questions. I will attempt to fustigate this to the best of my ability, but I think if you want to get the maximum enjoyment from Predestination, I would say just stop, go watch it, and return to us. I will spoilers. I do recommend it. I think it's quite a good film. It's very entertaining. I think you would share that opinion, Drew.
Oh, very much so. Yes.
Yeah. So consider yourself warned. As I say, I've done my best to keep this general, but I think it's one of those rare films where knowing as little as possible really does help going into it.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, it's only a 4-year-old film too.
Yeah.
Try not to spoil things deliberately, but we'd like to talk about films, and sometimes you need to. But for this, it's still a relatively recent film, and yeah, just want to recommend this film, and you're really going to get so much more out of it knowing as little as possible.
Mm-hmm. So in Predestination, we're introduced to Ethan Hawke's character, who the credits insist we should call the barkeep for some reason, shuffling around in the shadows attempting to foil a bombing, and partially succeeding, containing the damage to an enclosure built for such duty, and his face, which wasn't. He scrambles for a device which blasts him back in time to his own time period, and one quick Ethan Hawke-shaped face transplant later, he's back with his boss, Noah Taylor's Mr. Robertson, in some government time travel agency or other. After recuperating, he's given one last job, this sort of chrono crime fighting apparently taking its toll on the mind as well as the body. It's actually the same job that got him into trouble in the first place: find and stop the fizzle bomber, who, despite the name, is bombing buildings with people in them, not fizzles. As part of this work, he's sent to the 70s undercover as a barkeeper, where he meets Sarah Snook, the unmarried mother, and weasels her life story out of her in what turns out to be another axis of Mr. Robertson's plan to hire his own replacement. Convincing her to take this opportunity and along the way enact some vengeance for a previous misfortune that befell her, off the two go, hopping through a convoluted narrative that goes some way to explain why the unmarried mother's life story is so convoluted, but the details of which, again, I will leave to the interested. Now, if you'd asked me what I thought of this as the credits roll, I'd have a much more straightforward answer for you. It's a very engaging piece of work, and perhaps the film on this list that I was most awed by on first view. It often looks exceptionally pretty, even in a very grim industrial setting, and so props must go to the brothers Spierig, or their cinematographer Ben Knott perhaps, for creating such an arresting movie on, well, not a pittance exactly, but again, it's well below the budget this sort of thing normally requires.
$4 million, again, that's not a lot of money, particularly not in 2014.
Yeah, exactly. Ethan Hawke and Sarah Snook both ably work through a complex, maximally twisty-turning script, particularly from a character standpoint, and I found both characters quite compelling indeed, and combined with a narrative that does a pretty good job of keeping you guessing where it's going most of the time, it's easy enough to heartily recommend that you pop this on your watch list. Then I recommend not thinking about it at all, because for me at least, the more I think about it, the less I like it. All those points remain true, but the plot is, when you think about it, nonsense on stilts. I can let some extraordinarily unusual things go, given the nature of a government agency such as this. It could have, effectively, the perfect knowledge required for parts of this plan, but then it becomes baffling that their apparent solution for the stated aim of the agency is quite so indiscriminately murdery. And that's even given the most generous interpretation of Mr. Robertson being some extraordinary puppet master capable of complete manipulation of his agents and circumstances, which, to my mind, is a pretty unsustainable load to bear on what, his 10 lines of dialogue or something? If we assume instead he's just some random civil servant, well, the plot gets quite a bit less sensible. I guess all I can say is that even despite mentally picking this apart over the past few days, I really enjoyed watching it, and I really enjoyed picking it apart. so I suppose that makes it one of the most thought-provoking films I've seen over the past few years. And much like their previous Daybreakers film, it's a novel spin on a well-trodden formula. So, like I say, pop this on your watch list, and perhaps don't think about it much either afterwards. Drew, what do you make of this one?
First of all, I didn't realise that they'd done Daybreakers, but I remember really rather enjoying that. It was like a vampire film with a difference. I think it never really got the attention it deserved, that film.
No, I was very fond of that. And again, like I say, it was a genre that had been done to death at the time, and it managed to present a really novel twist on it that I quite enjoyed. So yeah.
And also that stars Ethan Hawke,
Yeah.
who I like a lot. Yeah, now I specifically said that you should cover this because I've seen it before.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought it was best covered after a first viewing. And I remember thoroughly enjoying it the first time. And really not so much the second time, which disappointed me because I enjoyed it so much. Now, it's not done as well as other films, but I did enjoy some of the second viewing of where, and frustratingly, I can't remember what it was we talked about recently, but I said something similar about a film we covered not so long ago, where that it's a time travel film that has some twists, but is very, very careful with its language.
Mm-hmm.
That entirely straightforward, ordinary things to say, but then when you understand what has actually happened, that it takes on a completely different meaning. And that's really cleverly done because it doesn't give anything away first time through. So I really appreciated that. I do remember watching the first time and I guessed what was going on pretty early, but I don't remember it diminishing my enjoyment at all.
No, there's sort of... It sells you a bit of a dummy because there's one twist, and well, one twist that's pretty obvious because law of conservation of characters, there wasn't really any other option for it, but then there's kind of another twist which is a bit harder to see coming, but I think just because it's so outre that it's kind of hard to place into any other more logical framework.
I'm not sure because there's one of the twists I really saw coming, and I think I probably would have seen coming whether I'd watched Red Dwarf or not. Yeah. But it is basically the Ouroboros episode, but our Rob or Ross.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I enjoyed it. I'm really disappointed I enjoyed it so much less the second time. I guess because so much of the film is based on its twists. And they're not stupid, and I guessed the twists a fair bit before they appeared, but I still found them quite satisfying. But knowing the twists, then going through the second time, I was kind of looking out for signs and stuff, and there's not. I mean, it's fairly well done, fairly well written that it doesn't kind of make no sense or anything like that. It's just that, like, that with that mystery taken out of the film, there isn't as much there. The only thing that bothered me both times, though, was just that when you find out the identity of the person they're seeking, and I'm like, really?
Yeah.
That's really?
Yeah, it's not set up incredibly well on a character basis.
No, it doesn't make a lot of sense. I mean, sort of they try to explain it away, maybe a bit in the way that Primer does too, of like basically frazzled brains or something, but that's the only bit both times I found particularly unsatisfying.
Yeah, that's what I'm referring to. The interpretation I've read sort of says that this was someone else's master plan, and I think that is not something that is sustained by the weight of its evidence that it presents on screen. So, yeah, it doesn't quite work for me on that basis either.
But the rest of it, I mean, again, first time around, I really, really enjoyed it. Mm-hmm. So I absolutely recommend watching it once, at the very least. And Sarah Snook, I thought, was fantastic in it. Yes. I've seen her in much, and she's in Steve Jobs. That's a pretty terrible film. Mm-hmm. So a complete aside, but the film Steve Jobs that doesn't actually in any way explain why Steve Jobs was interesting or different or special. Yeah. well done. An entire film about a person and you miss what was important about that person. Well done, Mr. Sorkin. Well done, Mr. Sorkin, indeed, you muppet. But yeah, beyond that, seen her in The Dressmaker, a film with a very satisfying end, so I can recommend that. Not only would you find me recommending Kate Winslet films, but The Dressmaker's good. But beyond that, apart from a very minor role in Sleeping Beauty, I've not seen her in anything else. She's great. I'd love to see more of her.
Yeah.
Really, really good actor. Ethan Hawke I like a lot. He's really good at it too. And those two carry the bulk of it. There really aren't many other people in it.
Yeah.
I mean, Noah Taylor pops up for, what did you say, like 10 lines or something he has in the full film?
Yeah,
Scott?
if that. Yeah.
And he could be anybody, to be honest. Yeah. Not to denigrate his performance, he just doesn't really have a lot to perform. It's a fairly insignificant role.
Yeah.
So it's just those two people together, and they carry so much of the film, and it's just really, really great. Their performances are superb. Also, just it's kind of amusing that it's based on a short story by Robert A. Heinlein.
As are all the best films.
I mean, I know that that not all of his films were particularly faithfully, or all of his books were particularly faithfully adapted, but still, I wouldn't have immediately guessed it was a Robert Heinlein story. But yes, that's not to do with the quality of the film. I just thought that was interesting. You wouldn't peg this alongside Starship Troopers, would you?
No.
But yes, it's definitely worth a watch one time through.